Hey, dead man still walking. Me! No, I'm not the dead man. I'm Dr. Walking Dead. I got that moniker because I tend to study zombies for some reason, but I'm actually quite alive. Anyway, this is part two of our somewhat experimental short series mini review sequence that we're going to try launching on the Jay of the Dead's new horror movies YouTube channel. So once again, this is we are affiliated with Jay of the Dead's new horror movies podcast, available wherever you get your favorite podcast material. And it's a subsidiary podcast, Dead Man Still Walking, which is my zombie podcast. Anyway, those recordings are available, and we keep it free so people can enjoy the love. Anyway, this is part two of my solo cast A24 horror film review based on the excellent coverage provided by the No Bodies horror movie podcast. So they did the Royal Rumble, as it were, of 28 A24 horror movies, and I am taking that inspiration to provide some reviews of my own. So in the first video, part one, going through chronologically, I went through the first 5 A24 horror movies, which were Enemy, Under the Skin, Ex Machina, Life After Beth, and Tusk. That group included one 10 out of 10 film, which is Ex Machina, in my humble opinion, and my lowest rated A24 horror movie, Tusk. Well, we're going to continue on with this episode, and we're going to move right into 2015's, everyone excited? Robert Eggers, yes, you know it, it is The Witch, or as my good friend Greg Mortis would say, The Vavitch. Now, this film has been a little polarizing because I think Robert Eggers is a little bit polarizing. But he wrote this and he directed it, and Eggers loves period pieces and he loves period authenticity. So the puritanical language of this film is a little hard to get past. But I love it because simply existing in puritanical New England is a horror movie for me. And we get to see that kind of what frontier living was like. This is a great example of American Gothic storytelling, because the Gothic in the U.S. is mostly about the frontier, the unexplored, and of course, the ancient forest. And that's where we get a lot of bad news. Well, I watched this movie, it had been out a couple of years, but I watched it for the first time when I was home alone, and it was late, and it was dark, and I watched it in bed on my iPad, and it scared the crap out of me. So I have a really fond place in my heart for this. It may have been the first A24 movie I saw, and I found it very scary. I found the ending very scary. So goats, say no more. And then the final sequence with the witches is very, very disturbing. So I give this one a 10 out of 10. And I know a lot of people do, and maybe some people will give me some grief over that. But it's back when Anya Taylor-Joy was kind of new. It was when Eggers was a little bit new to the scene, as he was trying to put together a name for himself. And I really like his work. I'm very excited to see what he does with Nosferatu. So this one is a 10 out of 10. I do not have, let's see, I don't want to give anything away, but I only have 4 10 out of 10 films from A24. The first was Ex Machina, and now this one, The Witch. So there you go. Now, we're also in 2015 here. They had 3 films that year. And this one I didn't see until quite recently. It's called Green Room. Green Room, Jay of the Dead was recommending Green Room to me for a long time, and I finally did watch it. So this is written and directed, so another kind of auteur effort here, by Jeremy Saulnier. The cast is super noteworthy because this may have been Anton Yelchin's final film before he died tragically, and it's great to see him. It also features Imogen Poots, who I love. I loved her when she was in 28 Weeks Later. And it also features Patrick Stewart as a bad guy. Evil Patrick Stewart is super, super cool. So I like that as well. Now, Green Room, the premise is actually very, very simple. It's about a punk rock group who are in a green room, at a bar after they've played a show, and they are in the wrong place at the wrong time. So most of the film takes place at that one location. It takes place in the bar, and it takes place really in that room and the room underneath it. And it's about the clash of the punks with the neo-Nazis and the violence that comes after that. And the violence is very realistically presented, and it's really upsetting. One of the things Jay mentioned to me, and one of the reasons I found it so interesting, is it is somewhat similar in structure to some zombie movies. Although there aren't any zombies or any supernatural elements at all, it is a very realist film. But the idea of being trapped in a room, this kind of survival horror thing that's going on, is somewhat evocative of some of the zombie film tropes and themes. And it's got a lot of tension and dread. Now, I liked it, and I liked it a lot, but sometimes it seems like there was a little bit too much tension. And I know that sounds weird, but it seems like sometimes we were waiting and waiting and waiting until something was to come to pass, or we were building up the tension without a total lot of payoff, and it does kind of take a little slow roll to get going. But acting is great. The scares are pretty great. The violence is pretty good because they've got some really scary dog action. So I went back and forth on this a little bit, but I finally landed at an 8 out of 10. Now that's still a pretty good review from me. I do put this as a high recommendation. It is on, I'm just checking, it's on Cinemax right now. So I do recommend it. And if you're kind of a fan of punk rock and kind of a fan of realist horror, I think this is probably one you want to check out and maybe even own. So that's Green Room 2015. Okay, this moves us on to another 2015 film, The Black Coat's Daughter. Now, over on Nobodies, they really liked Black Coat's Daughter, and I've heard from other people really favorable things about this film. It is an interesting movie that takes place, and you don't 100% realize it at the beginning, but it takes place in two intercut timelines featuring three actresses who look a little similar. And now that's a personal problem, I know that, because we've got Emma Roberts, and we have Kiernan Shipka, and we have Lucy Boynton. Now, for whatever reason, it's probably me. Emma Roberts and Kiernan Shipka look a little similar. So I got a little confused at the beginning as to who was doing what and when. But Lucy Boynton is very different, and I like how sweet and innocent she looks. It really plays into the plot, and it is an important plot point. This is another auteur piece, by the way, written and directed by Oz Perkins, and it is kind of one of A24's go-tos. It's a little bit of the kind of satanic film, a little bit of satanic action going here. Here's the problem. I watched this last year, and I completely forgot about it. I completely forgot I had seen it. And so when I was watching A24's horror films, I started watching it, and I was 30 minutes in before I thought, wait a minute, this seems really familiar. I don't think that is a good recommendation for a film, although it may be just some long COVID action on my part. So I feel bad about that. That's why I've started letterboxing so I can remember what I've actually seen and, kind of when I've seen it and what I thought about it. So there's some great stuff in here. The cinematography is really amazing. The acting is really solid and kind of creepy. And everything that takes place in the boiler room is just awful. But it just didn't tighten up enough, and it wasn't memorable enough for me, and so I'm a little biased on it. I do highly recommend it. I think it is a pretty great film, but I think the storyline is a little overly convoluted. That's just kind of my opinion. So I do give this one actually a 7 out of 10. I do recommend it, so I would say this is worth a stream. It's available over on Max. And I liked it, and I think I'm going to give it another chance in another year, and maybe I'll have forgotten it again, and then it can be like a new experience. All right, I don't feel super good about that review because I feel kind of guilty about it. All right, the next one is another one that didn't quite live up to expectations, although this one didn't really have hype the way Blackcoat's Daughter did. And so this is the only A24 horror film that came out in 2016. It is called The Monster. The Monster, which is almost exclusively performed by Zoe Kazan, who I like. I think she's really great. And Ella Ballantine. And again, A24, same writer and director, Brian Bertino. I do love the writer-director, and it does lend some credence to the whole auteur theory. Anyway, this film is about a horrible mother and her neglected teenager and how they go out on the road at night in a storm and they crash their car and are stuck in the wilderness because this monster is in the forest and tormenting them. And that's all cross-cut with flashbacks to the relationship between the mother and the daughter. So it's all right. The monster's kind of cool, although derivative. But basically, this is a 1 hour and 31 minute metaphor for alcoholism. And it's really just the idea that the true monster in their relationship is the fact that mom's an alcoholic and kind of a deadbeat, and the daughter needs to survive the mother. So, it's all right. It's got some moments. I think it would have worked better as a short film. Even at 90 minutes, it feels a little long. So I'm not a lover of this one. 6 out of 10. I can still recommend it as maybe a low priority stream, especially if you're interested in the A24 films. So not a lot of love for that. All right, now my last one, unprofessional podcasting here as I hit my tripod. The last one I want to look at is another one that was very popular over at the No Bodies podcast, although I found it somewhat disappointing, and that is 2017's It Comes at Night. So one of the problems that people have openly admitted and discussed with this film is that it was marketed incorrectly and the title was a little bit misleading. So a lot of people are thinking, it's got to be a monster movie, or maybe it's even a zombie movie, because as the film begins, we see that it is there's some sort of plague, some sort of deadly virus that is really lethal, and people are like hiding out in the woods and holed up in their homes and their cabins. And we have a family that's trying to stay together, and we have another family who comes to them for help. And then you get that great apocalyptic ethical question. Do you put your own family at risk to help someone else's family? Well, with another writer-director at the helm, Trey Edward Schultz tells us this story about what could happen in such a terrible situation. One of the problems I have is the it in It Comes at Night isn't ever really addressed. And when it is finally addressed, I think it's a little anticlimactic, if not disappointing. The film is done well. It has a lot of tension and dread. There's a lot of suspense, and there is a very disturbing and upsetting climax. But I just didn't really get into it. It's very dark because so much of it is done at night. And there is some weird tension between the family members. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't in the right place. Because the No Bodies ladies love this so much, I feel I may be wrong, or I feel a little guilty, but I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. Maybe that's too low, but that's kind of my gut. So 7 out of 10 for It Comes at Night. It's also available on Max. So there we go. There are 5 more A24 films. I would like to say, just as wrapping up, the next film in the list would be The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Now, The Killing of a Sacred Deer is weird, and it's kind of interesting, and it is, it's from the guy who made The Lobster. I like The Lobster better because it's easier to understand how it's funny, kind of satirically funny, but Killing of a Sacred Deer is just weird to me. This is Yorgos Lanthimos. And I'm not counting this as part of this series because I don't think it's really a horror film. Now, Internet Movie Database says it is, so by all means, use the comment feature of YouTube to argue with me, rebut me, or just make fun of me. It's totally fine. Anyway, here we go, part 2. I'll get part 3 done, and we'll learn about the next crop of 5 A24 horror films. Thanks for watching. Please tune in to new horror movies and to the No Bodies Horror Podcast. Thank you.